The world of Mustafar was once a green planet full of life, but after continuous battles between the Jedi and the Sith, the stresses that were inflicted on the planet's core turned the world into a volcanic hell. The two neighbouring gas giants of Lefrani and Jestafed were moved from their usual orbits by a dark side weapon, and as their new orbit ripped Mustafar to its core, the surface was exposed to the lava beneath it. Though life on the surface was dramatically reduced, the world was not forgotten to the Sith, and several millennia after the world was torn apart, the planet would play host to a galaxy-defining duel. At the end of the Clone War, Obi-Wan Kenobi had been one of the few Jedi to survive Order 66, and after witnessing the massacre at Coruscant, he was dispatched by Grandmaster Yoda to find his fallen apprentice Anakin Skywalker. Even as Obi-Wan watched the security recordings of Anakin becoming Darth Vader, he knew that the cause of Anakin's fall was related to Padme Amidala. Taking a DC-0052 speeder to the apartment of the Senator, Obi-Wan was quick to ask C3PO if Anakin had visited, and the protocol droid feared for his life at Obi-Wan's reaction at hearing of a Jedi rebellion. When the distressed Senator emerged, she denied knowledge of Anakin's location, and though Obi-Wan told her of Anakin killing the younglings, she refused to help him hunt down Anakin. After being dismissed from the building, Obi-Wan seemed to have disappeared, but the Jedi Master was actually waiting beneath Amidala's Naboo starskiff. In a fateful decision, Obi-Wan jumped aboard the ship and hid in a stowaway, just as Padme and C3PO left for Mustafar. But what if Obi-Wan never left for Mustafar? What would happen to Vader? Would Padme and her children survive? As Padme Amidala resumed her frantic walk across the apartment, Obi-Wan was somewhat obscured from this view by C3PO, and he knew that this path was closed. Piloting his airspeeder from the veranda, he saw the glint of Padme's ship on the platform below, and perhaps this was his final hope. The Jedi Master swooped down to look for a suitable landing zone, but when he finally spotted a space near another apartment, he saw a group of clones leaving the building and monitoring the area. Obi-Wan was forced to turn away again, and now desperate to land, he opted for the transparent steel roof of an apartment. Wasting no time and jumping out of his ship, he used forced enhanced dashes and jumps to move towards the Naboo starskiff, but just as he arrived on the platform, he looked in despair as the ship left for its destination. Just like his duel with Maul on Naboo, he was not quite fast enough. Obi-Wan had now failed Yoda's mission, but hearing the footsteps of clones heading his way, he made a return for his ship. Once he was in the air, the Jedi Master was now secure in his belief that he could not find Anakin, so despite his earlier doubts, he moved to find and help Grandmaster Yoda. Making his landing on one of the empty delegate platforms, Obi-Wan could hear the cackles of the Emperor, but he could also feel the light side from Yoda fighting for its life. Once he found his way to one of the entrances to the main Senate chamber, Obi-Wan saw the ongoing duel with his eyes, and the speed of the combatants far surpassed anything he had seen. He had thought Grievous had been twirling his blades quickly, but Palpatine and Yoda were just specks of green and red. Yoda had warned him that he would die quickly at the hands of Sidious, and now he realised he was correct, but seeing Sidious gave him an idea. Having witnessed the recordings of the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan wanted to find its source, and though it pained him to do so, he thought he could watch Sidious's orders to Vader and possibly discover its location. As the ferocious duel receded into the background, the Jedi were able to navigate between the sub-levels, and as the duel moved onto the podium, Obi-Wan found himself in a suite beneath the action. With Mas Amedda confident of victory, the Jagrina retreated to prepare a victory speech in front of the Jedi Temple, and this left Obi-Wan free to access the office. But as he looked for a way to trace Palpatine's transmissions, the console started to flash with an incoming transmission from Mustafar. Obi-Wan knew that this is where Vader was located, but with Palpatine preoccupied, he had to think fast, and force pulling the arm of the closest royal guard, he quickly put on the disguise before accepting the transmission. Whilst Obi-Wan had endured a chaotic journey after leaving Padme's apartment, Padme and C3PO travelled to the world of Mustafar, and after Vader had slaughtered the Separatist Council in their hideout, the Senator ran to greet Vader. As he declared himself to be more powerful than the Chancellor, Padme was struggling to believe what Anakin had turned into and slowly backed away. Now fearing the repercussions, Vader declared that if she was to move any further, she would become his enemy, and worried for the life of her children, she decided to follow Vader for now. Such was the overconfidence of the Sith apprentice, He believed that Padme had sealed her allegiance to his cause, and now he wanted to defeat the Emperor. Returning to the Separatist war room, Vader activated the holo projector, but expecting to see his master delivering his next mission, he is met by the red figure of a royal guard. Knowing the guards were sworn to silence, Vader told the disguised guard that his mission was complete, and now he would be returning to Coruscant. Obi-Wan rapidly ended the transmission, and removing his disguise, he switched the code to that of Padme Amidala. After Vader returned to the war room, Padme realised this would be her last chance to change her mind, and glancing at Vader running away from her, she was poked in the leg by R2-D2, and with the astromech also knowing what his master was up to, they walked away to the Naboo starskiff. Thanks to the extended range on her modified ship, she soon received a transmission from Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she told him what had happened on Mustafar and her plans to move away from Coruscant, to a location where she could safely deliver her children. As Obi-Wan was about to ask for the destination, he saw the cloak of Yoda floating towards him, and instinctively, he reached out to cushion it from falling. As he did so, the small green figure of Yoda soon followed, and Obi-Wan replicated the feat, and they now stared at the roof of the Senate chamber. Though the repulsor pods, which had previously housed senators, were now obscuring their view of Palpatine, the echoes of his maniacal laughter were enough to confirm their defeat. When Obi-Wan told Yoda that Anakin was returning to Coruscant, Yoda realised that they had failed their last attempt to defeat the Sith, but Obi-Wan pointed to the potential of Padme's children. With the Coruscant guard on the prowl, the two Jedi scrambled through a light well in one of the maintenance shafts, and are taken to safety by Bail Organa. Once they convened on the Tantive 4, the Jedi moved to Naboo, where Padme had escaped to after an encounter with Vader on Mustafar, but when they left hyperspace, they were shocked to find the Empire was already there and setting up a blockade. Though the Tantive 4 was not designed for combat, Obi-Wan and Yoda utilised the Station Delta 7 Jedi interceptors, and during their descent, Obi-Wan sensed the ominous signature of his old apprentice. To avoid the detection of the Empire, the Jedi buried themselves in a cave adjacent to the Solu River before instructing their astromechs to scan for a medical centre. As the droids rotated their rangefinders, the Jedi noticed something disturbing, and on the top of the opposing hill, a military garrison was marching through Theed, shooting anyone who dared to show a flicker of resistance. Their Jedi instincts were twitching to save the people of Naboo, but their greater mission was to protect Padme and her children, so after the droids had discovered her skiff in the Theed Palace, the Jedi ascended to the upper planes. Once constructed to house the monarchs of Naboo, the beginning of the Empire saw the monarchy become symbolic, rather than holding any real power, and the Jedi could see signs of Imperial dignitaries around the palace front, led by former Naboo security force Captain Panaka. Though the main entrance was covered, Obi-Wan knew from his time scouting the palace as a Padawan that there were multiple entrances, and one was the palace starport located near the power generator. Evading the Imperial presence, the two Jedi entered the starport through a hidden entrance, and rushed through the largely vacant palace to be greeted by R2-D2. The astromech guides the Jedi to a medical area, where Padme had already given birth to Luke and Leia, and Obi-Wan could see the truth of Anakin's fall within Padme's eyes. As the medical droid was about to perform a diagnostic, a chain of explosions rocked the palace, and the medical ward was split into two. The Jedi and their children were divided from Padme, having been blasted onto a ledge of the cliffs adjoining the palace, and had used the Force to save the children and the droids. The path back up was now blocked by the 501st Legion led by Vader, who had sent a false transmission to Palpatine so he could find Padme, and had been ordering his troops to secure the capital, but was now desperately looking for the Senator. The Sith saw her still attached to her bed, several meters from her original place, and when she saw the Sith, her eyelids contracted and Vader let out a scream of despair. Ordering for a medical droid and a clone medic, he valiantly used the Force to transfer Force energy into Padme, maintaining her pulse until she could be moved to a Bacta tank. Vader proved to himself and the Jedi that he needed these new powers to save Padme, but lifting the entire clone legion into the air, he punished them for their lack of control, as they nearly killed Padme through their reckless explosions. Turning to face the half-broken medical droid, its neck started to tighten when it hesitated to reveal the status of the children, and Vader ripped it to shreds. As Vader's starfighter led the gasping 501st Legion off of the planet with Padme, Obi-Wan and Yoda were still perched on the side of the cliff face, and had just used a lot of energy to conceal their signatures in the Force. Though they were saddened by the capture of Padme, They had the twins, who they hoped would redeem the Jedi.